Well, welcome back. What we are about to look at, the notes that you have in front of you, and the lecture about which we're going to embark, or on which we're about to embark, is not just unique, but it's necessary. For, say, the last 200 years of biblical investigation, inquiry, we have found that liberals and those who deny Jesus Christ have a tendency to do this. They will separate the actual historical person named Jesus that they doubt exists and what they would call the charismatic Jesus. Basically the idea that, well, you believe in him, and so that should be enough, whether or not he was historical. Problem is, of course, as you know, as it says in 1 Corinthians 15, if Jesus is not actually who he said he is and didn't do what he said he did, then we're still in our sin. Christianity is a fraud. In fact, the claims of Christianity I would lay in front of you and anybody else are based on the historical fact of Jesus. As recently as Raphael Lattister, the guy who wrote There Was No Jesus, There Is No God, in the Washington Post around Christmas time, as always, around Christmas time of 2014, he said, there is no actual proof that Jesus ever existed. And again, he wasn't denigrating that people believe in something. He's simply saying, you're believing in a fairy tale. Here's the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, the notes that you have in front of you, started by one of my heroes, and quite frankly, one of the men who's shaped my thought, Dr. Gary Habermas. He began some 30 years ago preparing notes and compiling records that have now come into your hands. It's actually been a number of books. He's not the only one to do it. Josh McDowell has now done it. But here's the question. What could we know about Jesus, about the actual historical Jesus, from an unbiased source? Anybody who deals with forensics, anybody who deals with evidence, judicial fact, knows that there are biased testimonies. Somebody who's a character witness in a court, who's a friend of someone, that may have some weight, but not nearly as much weight as an unbiased source. But we have the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which we will embark on through this series. But what do we have external of the New Testament? What can we trust? What can we look to? Well, again, it's laid in front of you in 6 categories. Jewish writers, historians, Greek and Roman politicians, those that would be considered Gentile writers, or sometimes we would even say secular writers, and other religious writings such as the Talmud. Here's what we have. Number one, you can construct the entire New Testament based on the quotes by the guys who were trained by the apostles. For instance, Polycarp, etc. You can reconstruct the entire New Testament just based on their quotes, with the exception of 11 verses. You heard me talk about that in our New Testament reliability. However, here's something interesting, and to me, a driving study, an obsession. What about those that did not believe in Jesus? What about those who denied that Jesus was God, denied that Jesus was Messiah, denied that he was God come in the flesh? What can we reconstruct by contemporary historical sources written around his time? What you have in front of you is over 100 facts from 16 different sources of non-believers. We're not just talking about unbiased sources. We're talking about people who literally hated the Christians, did not like the Christians. Pliny the Younger, as you'll see, his job was to torture them. And he's simply writing a letter saying, look, here's who they are, and here's what they do, and how do I torture them more? Josephus, his histories, probably one of the most trusted, respected, and contemporary meaning he was alive when Jesus was alive, or he was alive when Paul was alive, if we say it that way. What did he say? Just an example. They all attest to the fact that he was a person, that he led a revolution, that he claimed to be Messiah, that he was crucified based on the blasphemy to the Jews and the treason to the Romans of claiming to be God. Furthermore, you can see and reconstruct that the early church worshipped him as if he were God, sang hymns unto him as if he were a God. Now, anyone can say, I don't trust or I don't believe that Jesus is Lord. I leave that to you. I think that the evidence is clearly in his favor. But you can't say he wasn't historical. And you cannot say that there's no evidence for him. With 16 sources, 13 books, and like I said, over 100 different citations about his life, you can reconstruct his life more than you can reconstruct any human being in history who was the founder of a worldview or a movement. Period. There is no other person in antiquity who was discussed more, talked about more, considered more, and I lay it before you. So what you have in front of you, 21 pages, and then in very small font, all the citations. All the citations. We're talking about government documents. We're talking about oral histories. We're talking about Jewish histories. We're talking about written form and testimony about the life of Jesus Christ, the one from Nazareth, who was crucified, died, and they couldn't find the body after he resurrected, that he appeared to many. I'm telling you this because there's another form, if you will, of apologetic. All they had to do, these contemporaries, all they had to do was produce a body. I mean, think about it. If the resurrection is central to Christianity, and it is, and if it was central to the teaching and preaching of the church as it exploded, and it was, all they had to do was find a body, wave it around and say, here he is. There was even a story that you can read right there in the notes that the idea that, they had taken the body. There was a man named Judah who took the body and hid it, moved it from the open Josephus grave, or Joseph of Arimathea grave. All they had to do is produce a body, show it to us, and Christianity dies. So it's not just an apologetic, and it's not just good historiography, which is the term that you have to know for this lecture. Historiography. It's a term that means the history of history, or the research of history, or the forms of history. Historiography is, in fact, the method of doing historical research. So I need you to email it to me and say, hey, here's the term that you asked to be cited from the lecture to show that you listened to it. But nonetheless, you have in your hands a document that shows to even the most skeptical critic that there's more evidence from non-biased, extra-biblical sources about the life of Jesus Christ as a person, as an actual living person, and the proclamation of Jesus has not changed. It also means that all the apostles, the third apologetic, all the apostles who died so violently died knowing that their proclamation was central to what they were preaching. Now, here's why I say this. People die for lies all the time, but they don't believe them to be a lie. All 12 of the apostles, if I may quote Charles Colson said he knew that the resurrection took place, and he knew that the body was resurrected and Christ had ascended and defeated death, because all 12 of the apostles, including the later ones and Paul, never changed the story. Not one bit. Not one bit. And he said he couldn't even get the guys who were involved in Watergate to keep their mouths shut for 3 weeks. The point is that nobody has ever died for something they knew to be a lie. They'd give it up. At least out of 12, at least one would say, okay, I'm just kidding. They all believed that what they had seen was real. So, as important as this is, central to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, central to the Gospels, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the literal life of Jesus Christ. And what you have in front of you is an attestation from non-believers, skeptics, critics, and cynics, haters, if you will, that Jesus was who he said he was. Send that word to me by email.